Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Contour Community Meeting. Today is September 21st, 2021. Please add yourself to the attendee list there. It's super nice to have that list going forward. We're going to dive into some status updates, and if anyone has any discussion topics, please put them in there too. Let's start with Nick.
Hi everyone, just a FYI, we've discussed it before, but the quarterly release changes are approved and merged. I am just in the process of getting all of the site documentation updated to reflect that, but the TLDR is that Contour 119 is due out any day. Contour 120 is due out sometime around the end of October. And that Contour 120 will be the first one where there will be a 3-month gap until the next release. That's what I mean by quarterly release. It'll also be the first one where we start the process of extending our support window to 3. When it comes out, it'll be the only supported Contour version. But then as we add new versions at 121 and 122, those will also be supported. When we get to 123, version 120 will fall out of support. So rather than the current stance we have where only the current Contour version is supported, we are gradually moving to supporting 3 Contour versions. It's going to take a little while because we're also moving to 3 monthly releases. So it's going to take like 9 months to a year for that policy to be fully in effect.
That's awesome. And the support matrix that you showed, I think it was 2 weeks ago, is that in the docs already?
Yes, so it's in the process of being added. The support matrix is in the process of being added. That explains what I just said. But I've also merged a change to provide the compatibility and support information in a YAML format at the root of our repo. So there's a YAML file at the root of our repo that at least I think I mentioned. Anyway, if not, it's in the process of being merged. But there's a YAML file that describes for each Contour version, is it supported, and what versions of Envoy, the Contour operator, and Kubernetes and the Gateway API are all required for that version of Contour, or supported for that version of Contour. So that information is intended to be machine consumable for people who have downstream dependencies on Contour. And we'll just update that when we cut a new release.
I wonder if we could do. I'm just thinking loudly here because we do have the releases listed in the website config YAML. I'm wondering if we can do some magic there so we don't have to update that one, that table.
Yeah.
Consistently.
I kind of decided that it was better to get the thing in and update it manually to start with, and then figure out
for sure. I'm just thinking long term, because then maybe we can say, hey, just show the latest 10 releases or 12 releases or whatever, and then do some automated magic markdown in there.
Yeah, it would be nice. Agreed.
Maybe something. Yeah, I'll see what we can do.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, actually, there's another thing I want to add on to the end. The configuration, this was Steve S's change, but he's not here. But yeah, so the design for the Contour configuration CRD has been merged, and Steve Stoker is in the process of implementing it. The idea here is that Contour's config file will still work until everybody is comfortable that the new stuff is good, but we'll have a CRD for configuration instead of the as another option, in addition to the current YAML file mounted via a config map that Contour supports. The intent here is to give everybody better feedback about the config and make sure, and use CRD validation to make sure that your config is valid earlier. And so if you try to apply something that has a mistake in it, then it won't apply, and the API server will tell you what's wrong. Cool. Yeah, so I think that one is a pretty big change. That's the defining feature for 119. Once we have this working, we'll cut 119. We anticipate that this will be like it won't be experimental. It'll work. but this will not be the default this will not be the default expected configuration method in Contour for a little while yet. So we'll wait a few releases before, or a release or two before we do that. Yeah, that's that. Any questions there, Jonas? You are currently the audience stand-in, so
Yeah. No, I think we covered the quarterly releases and the questions that I had about the configuration CRD as well. 2 weeks ago. So I think we're good.
Okay, well, yes, so Steve K, do you want to give us an update about Gateway API?
Yeah, just a quick update. So Gateway API V1 Alpha 2 is coming. So there's a release candidate out right now. And I think the hope is to get the V1 Alpha 2 version out soon. I'll let Nick add if he wants to add any more specificity to that. But I've been getting Contour ready to support V1 Alpha 2. So there are a number of changes that need to be made to the Contour code. So I've been taking the RC1 and using that to update Contour. So at this point, I've got the code updated and compiling and all of the test passing, which is a good start. Still need to take a pass through the V1 Alpha 2 API docs and make sure that that any other changes there get implemented appropriately. But I think the goal will be to for Contour 1.20 to have support for the V1 Alpha 2 Gateway API.
Yeah, from the Gateway API point of view, the final version of V1 Alpha 2 is due out in the next couple of weeks, probably. So we will be well and truly that'll be well and truly out before Contour 1.20 is due. The big changes are shown on the screen right now. The ones that Steve has already done, which is I'm extremely impressed by, is the gateway route binding changes and a bunch of other sort of API group changes and sort of field renames and stuff like that that are quite tricky to implement. The big other new features for the gateway API are the safer cross namespace references, using a new object called a reference policy, and there's a generic policy a different sort of policy attachment mechanism that's intended for people to add things like timeout policy or some other sorts of sort of request policies in a way that is extensible, but also has a standard way of it being applied. So you can set defaults and overrides and some other stuff like that. I'd strongly recommend having a look at that GEP, which is the gateway enhancement proposal. That one's actually really interesting. But yeah, it's I don't want to go into it too much now. Yeah, but so there's a significant amount of change in this API, and that's why we're not anticipating we'll be able to get it done until Contour 1.20.
Hey Nick, is that cross namespace, is that based on what we have in?
It actually is, yes. So the initial idea for that is based off the TLS certificate delegation that Contour has already. I sort of took that idea and ran with it a little bit, and then worked with the rest of the Gateway API maintainers to come up with a more generally applicable concept. That we've got some pretty good feedback from other APIs are also looking at doing something similar for securing their cross namespace references, which is nice.
Did they end up implementing your idea of like binding things through? I think you had like an idea for creating like an abstraction, right, that you can bind to different routes.
So yeah, so the way that we ended up doing the gateway route binding is that gateways. So it used to be that gateways selected which routes they would bind, like they would try and attach to. So the gateways were the owner of the relationship between the two objects. We flipped that around, and now the routes select which gateways they want to attach to. And the gateways have the opportunity to say, I will only accept attachment from this set of routes, which is the polarity is flipped. So the route owner is the person who decides what gateway they want to attach their route to, rather than the gateway owner deciding what routes get attached to the gateway. It's a subtle distinction, but it's important just in terms of the overall model that the application developer at the end of the day is the person who should be the one who's making the call about where their app gets exposed. And the intent there is to help enable more self-service use cases than the gateway one did. That's one of the feedbacks we've got about HTTP proxy in Contour is that, hey, this whole thing means that the person the team who owns the root HTTP proxy has to do a lot of work to update the includes if you're in a rapidly changing environment. Basically, you need a controller written to update that. And one of the things that we wanted to do was to make that a little bit easier for people to do. So, and at the end of the day, application developers want to be able to do stuff like have a Helm chart that applies their application and includes the ingress config or the gateway API config, or in this case, it'll be the HTTP route. And this way, there's a way that you can specify, if you have a standard naming scheme for gateways, then you can specify, hey, attached to the internet gateway or something like that. There's probably more work to do there, but that's the intent, is that this should be easier for people to be able to attach to gateways.
Cool, thanks. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Steve K. Sorry to hijack your update a bit. I think Sanjay, you're up next.
Yeah, Sanjay.
Yeah, so that first link is a link to a design that we I think is pretty much approved, but just wanted to make sure people are oh, it's in the title, Jonas, and it's in the content. So for HTTP cookie rewriting in Contour, so I mentioned this before in a community meeting. This is a design for how we're going to enable that. Starting to implement it, but just wanted to make people aware on the community meeting if they wanted to chime in on any thoughts before we merge this and finish everything up. Yeah, so take a look at that if you're interested, and let us know if we are doing things how you would like or not.
I know we've discussed a few issues regarding this before, so you're taking all of those into account, I'm guessing.
Yeah, this is gonna, so the few issues that this solves are hopefully going to be people who are asking for at the very, so there's kind of a few steps here to solve what people have been asking for, and also just generally provide this functionality. The few issues that people if you see in the goals section there's two links. People wanted to set cookie attributes on that third bullet with the two links down there. Yeah, people had issues around wanting to set attributes on the Contour session affinity cookie that is generated by Contour and Envoy when you use the cookie load balancing strategy that Contour provides. So the first step in this plan is that we're going to just kind of generically allow you to manipulate cookies generally, and then we can also possibly add some syntactic sugar to allow you to do that more directly in the load balancing strategy for cookies. And it's related to the second link in the agenda. Yeah, this is another similar thing where someone wants to be able to set those attributes on a cookie. The second link that I put under my discussion topic, yeah, that one. This one is kind of a start of like how the API will look if we transition away from the cookie load balancing strategy being its own standalone thing, and instead fold it into the request hash load balancing strategy. So right now you can, for load balancing between different backends on that a route is forwarding to, you can choose the cookie strategy where Contour and Envoy will generate a cookie value on a request, and then you send that back and you load balance that same app instance. Or, and this is a strict or right now, or you can request some attribute of request a load balance on some attribute of a HTTP request. It sounded like people, I think that number 3044 that's linked there, someone wanted to be able to do the the link in the top of the description. Yeah. People want to be able to do a list of things and combine the cookie load balancing with request hash load balancing, like both at the same time. So that PR, if you go back to that one page, this kind of proposes how we would deprecate the existing cookie strategy if we want to, and also allow, kind of give syntactic sugar for load balancing based on the on a session affinity cookie, either one that we provide the name of to be backwards compatible with the existing feature, or to allow people to specify what cookie they want to load balance on. So if you look at the diff there, there's a little bit of it, like a kind of like what the API could look like. Yeah, that other stuff is generated. Mostly the stuff that's interesting is the top part. But yeah, if people are interested in this, if we want to fold it into the request hash load balancing, yeah, let me know and I can keep working on this. This was kind of to solve that whole doing multiple request attribute and different load balancing strategies in one and in the list that people were requesting. So
This is great. Thank you so much, Sanjay.
Yeah, it's great work, Sanjay. I'm sorry I haven't given that a proper review yet. It's definitely high up near the top of my list. Yeah, I think the overall approach looks great to me. Yeah, I think that we definitely need to do something like this. I suspect that a lot of these requests have come from the fact that we added the ability to configure the cause settings, and once you have cause, then you need to be able to set same site secure and stuff like that on cookies to when you're using cause to have everything work properly.
Yep. Yeah, and also, I mean, if people are setting cookies in their applications are generating cookies, and you're doing path rewriting or path redirection, I'm a little bit surprised that we haven't gotten that many issues on people saying that the paths in their cookies are wrong, or the domains in their cookies are wrong. But
yeah,
that first link 4023 should give people the ability to modify cookies so that they can match things properly if they need to.
So if you're rewriting, if you're rewriting the path using the ingress config or HP proxy config, then you can make sure that the cookies are rewritten on the way back out to the client, so that they're correct when the request comes back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that is really important. Yeah, and I'm kind of surprised as well, but I think that it's more just that that people have been just sort of being like, oh, okay, that's the cookie support I have. And yeah, I think there's also a strong problem with because of the way that Contra is implemented, we do have the problem that if you are generating an application specific cookie, like your application is actually generating a cookie, we can't guarantee, like once that cookie goes out to the client and the request comes back, if we do use that as part of the hash, then you can't guarantee that the request will go to the request to the application server that generated that cookie the last time. So like it's possible that unless your application is written to synchronize cookies between application, like the session tokens between the instances of the application, then you can end up with a problem where the cookie sort of chases the session chases the cookie around all of the different endpoints. So yeah, that's I don't think that is a solvable problem without doing something like Metal B. And like one of the other proxies does a thing where they actually put they put some extra stuff on the front of the cookie, not even an attribute, but they actually munge the cookie on the way out with the server name that the cookie was set by. It might be Metal B. I can't remember though. one of the others. Yeah, and so that's the only sort of way that you can solve that, is to have some information munged into the cookie by the proxy, so that gets stripped again when it comes back, that tells you which endpoint you should go to.
Yeah, so in that cookie hash, that tab you have to the left, Jonas, that or sorry, to the left, yeah, that one. I had I'd seen all those the conversation and the issues about that, and the fact that like we're doing the best that we can by providing people the Envoy generated cookie. That passive flag is kind of a cop out to say, like, hey, if you really want to use your own app cookie, you can do it, but it doesn't really do. It's kind of so maybe we can remove that. Maybe we don't need to have that, but at the very least, that I had to be able to default to the existing contour generated name cookie name is that like use default session affinity flag. I don't know about the naming or anything of that, but then there's like a customizable cookie name if you want. But yeah, I know. I guess whoever is interested in it, take a look and see if this covers what you want, or if it can be simpler. But
I will do my best to check it out tomorrow. Cool. Okay.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. You had a website architecture proposal, Nick.
Yeah. So basically, when Celeste did our docs review, she sort of raised a couple of things about how the architecture of our website is a little weird. We've got a section called resources in the top level nav, and then another section under documentation called resources that talk about two different things. We've got a guide section that has some really great like task-based documentation, but doesn't really link to the other documentation very much, and some other things like that. And so what I'm trying to do, it feels like this feels like a greater scope than I should be asking the doc writers working group to do personally. But so what I wanted to do was to come up with a couple of proposals and bring them to the working group to say, here's a couple of things that I think we could do that make sense to me as a contour maintainer. Do they make sense to you as doc writers? So I'm fully aware that we need to make sure that the doc writers working group is involved, and it is definitely at the top of my mind, but it felt like it didn't feel right to me to ask the working group to do this fundamental redesign at this point in its life cycle.
So Gary Tai has actually started work on this already.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Yeah, so he has been working on moving things from resources over to docs/resources, because that way it's also searchable. So you can find it when you do a search in the docs, and it also makes more sense to have everything under docs, even guides, resources, you name it.
Agreed.
So the thing that we want to make sure though is that we don't break existing links. So he's implemented forwarding links for all the things that are currently under resources. But I'll loop you into that discussion with Gary.
Yeah, great.
I think that would make the most sense, so you can chat.
Yeah, I think that's he and I should have a chat then. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, just like I said, it kind of felt unfair to be like, please go and solve us this problem that we created.
No, it was one of the issues that we raised when we started the technical writing working group. Was just that, the reorganization of resources and guides. So that was one of the issues that we raised, and I think it was last week or the week before. He was like, "Yeah, I want to work on this." It's like, go for it.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm more than happy for Gary to do it. I'm happy to not have to do it myself, but it just felt like it was unfair to ask other people to do it when we're the ones who've got it to this point.
For sure. Yeah, right now he's mostly moving things over and cleaning things up. But I'll loop you into the discussion so you can see where he's at as well. And I think he'll be here on Thursdays, but you won't. So
yeah, exactly. So
I'll make sure that you both are synced.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Cool. Okay. So
One more thing before we dive into issue triaging and all of that. When it comes to the website, since we are a CNCF project, the website itself actually has the look and feel of a VMware project. So if we wanted to, at a later stage, redesign the site as well to become something more stand out, something that doesn't have the look and feel of other existing VMware projects, we're free to do so as well. So if we wanted to do that, we can open that up as a separate issue with the technical writers working group. We can open it up with CNCF and see if they can help us as well if we want to do a full-on redesign. We did that with Harbor about 1.5 years ago, where Luke from CNCF, he's no longer with CNCF, but Luke from CNCF, he helped us revamp the entire Harbor site. So if we want to do that with projectcontour.io, we also have that option. Right now, it's fine as is, but if we want to do something else, we can absolutely do that.
Yeah, cool. That feels like a thing we should consider doing as we start knocking over some of the final dominoes towards graduation, so that we can hit that before a graduation milestone.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Okay, so before we hit some triage, does anyone else have anything they want to add? Okay. I'm just looking for my tab with the contour board. Okay. So yeah, I think Alex, you've been doing some triage already, but do you want to talk through some of the stuff that's in 120 and so on? I will do the sharing this time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we have, I mean, all right, do we just want to go through it one by one?
Yeah, I think I'm just looking. I think yeah, this is the 119.
Yep.
119 list. I think we've hit a lot of this stuff already. You can see most of the things are merged PRs or closed issues. I think there's a few things in here, Alex, that we won't get to. ALS.
Yep.
The ALS block
yeah,
list.
that list. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's the ALS. Ame has a PR open for it that's a little stale, but I think he's still planning on coming back to it. This one, so I think we should drop that into maybe 120 down the bottom. See how we go. Okay with everyone? Yep, cool.
So sorry, Nick. So is the PR in, or is it?
So there's a draft PR open, I think, or a partially implemented PR, but the PR is not yet. No, there is a PR open, but it is not ready.
I think it's just a design doc at this point, actually, for access log service.
Yes, you're right. Yep, thanks. 120. Okay. And so yeah, the allow list and block lists, we can put it in 120 and see how we go, but I'd be a bit surprised if it got there, Alex. Maybe it should.
Yeah, we can move that
better.
into 1.20.
120. Okay.
I think that I had a question on that, which was, how do we make that? Like, how do we? I think there's like this issue that we have with a lot of our features, which is, at what granularity do we make it available?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of those classic cases where I have to be the senior engineer who's like, well, it depends. So in this case, in this case, it is tricky because, like, you know, like as I said, you may want to allow only some IPs to access a particular service, or you might want to block IPs globally. Those are the two obvious use cases I can see. But obviously, if you're doing blocking or allowing in one spot, then you may as well do the other one in each spot as well, because the mechanism is going to be very similar. So yeah, like that's why it's like, I think it's probably easier to start with the global one and build into the in general, it's easier to start with a global one and build into the specific one, unless you have a real strong requirement for the specific thing. Steve K, I mean, we've done that on a couple of things that you've worked on. Does that meet up with your experience?
Yeah, I guess so. The one thing I'm thinking about is a little bit mechanical, but with the moves to the config CRD, like if we enable things globally, that means they go into the config CRD, and then it's not as easy to, if we wanted to like drop them as global options.
Yeah,
you can't really do that from an API compatibility perspective, but I guess in this case, we might end up, rather than dropping the global option, we might end up supporting both, so both the global and the like per vhost option, in which case, yeah. I mean, I'd probably go with global first.
Yeah,
I think
I think we'll end up just like stuffing a lot of things into the CRD array. Like anything that we would want to be enabled at a global level, we would end up just
throwing into the CRD is the place to put that. And one of the advantages of moving to CRD though is that ideally we can create the structs for the CRD and then reuse those same structs in the actual HTTP proxy. If you want to have the same information configured at a different level, you just pick up that same struct and drop it into the HTTP proxy. Ideally, it may or may not end up being the case depending on the use case, but that should make the work a little bit less. That once we've got a struct that works for, say, in this case, holding IP allow us to block this stuff, then we can pick up the struct and put it into and put it into a HTTP proxy, like at the route level, and be like, okay, that's now the route level one done. So the design is, in this case, is actually going to be pretty identical between the two. There's not going to be extra stuff to configure at the service level, aside from the fact that you have allow us to block this at the service level, if that's even a thing that we can do, which I would hope we could.
Yeah.
Okay. So that one's good. It's just, I mean, I think we should finish running through 119. Looks like we've got the PR for this one open. This should go in soon. That's going to make, so I know we're waiting on V1 Alpha 2 for this, Steve K.
Yeah, I opened this one, but the names for the conditions refer to forward twos, which are going away in V1 Alpha 2. So I figured I'd just hold this until after we get V1 Alpha 2, so I don't have to rename conditions.
Okay, so let's push this to 120. All right, change the milestone. Change the milestone from in here without needing to. Okay. Oops, that's not. What? Why do I not have the 120 milestone available?
I don't think we've created an actual milestone yet for 120.
Oh, okay, that's to do on me. Just check. We have not. Okay, let's do that now.
I'm just going to remove all the needs triage from the closed issues that are in that column.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
It's a little confusing.
So I won't. So I'll put a due date of like end of October. I would hope we're actually a little bit before that, but. And I may as well. So again, Alex, just make 100% sure that we're clear here. The the milestones are used for burn down, for us to check what's left in the milestone, whereas the project board is used for like, what do we think will get done, right? Like, so usually the milestone is used for as we get closer to the end, to be like, what's left.
Right.
And the project board is for like, what should we be looking at doing? It's like at the start of the milestone, and then the milestone is for like, we're near the end, what's left, because it's quicker to hit the milestone, to see what milestone things are in the GitHub UI than it is to come to the board.
Yeah, and I've been pointing, folks within VMware to the project board,
Okay. Awesome.
the swim lanes, right? So
Yep.
any account teams or customers wondering what's going on upstream, they look at the project board and not the milestone.
Yeah. So Sanjay, did you say you were just going to go through and clear the these triage runs out, or?
Yeah, if
wanna
you
do-
refresh, they should be gone,
Excellent. Great.
or at least from 119. I guess the 120 one's not yet.
Yeah. Okay, so pretty good. This one, I don't think,
don't know
doesn't
if
feel like
it'll-
that's going to close out in 120, in 119.
Yeah, it might not.
And same for this one too, I think. I mean, you've started having a look at that, but
Yeah.
this is in progress. That should hopefully merge before we do 119. Let's check this one. I think this is kind of ongoing work. I don't think we're not going to finish that for 119. I'll go back and tidy up the milestones for everything.
Are you talking about the DAG ticket?
Yeah, so this is so right now we have a bunch of validation logic in the DAG that checks that gateway API objects are valid, but it's far more efficient to put that into so we have a validation package as well. So the step one was move that validation login into the validation package and use it from there, and then check what validation is contour specific and what's not.
Right.
The gateway API already supplies a webhook for validation. So the point that Daniel was making here was that we should take any non-contour specific stuff and push it into the upstream validation, and then everyone gets the benefit, and then we don't have to maintain it.
Okay. Yeah, isn't that part of the managed envoy for 120, or like tightly coupled with that idea?
No, so I mean there'll be changes to the DAG, but this is actually a very specific sort of technical, like quite low level thing that Daniel suggested we do. So I think it fits into the sort of the 120 timeframe. But yeah, it probably there's a bit of work that needs to be done there to tidy it up. So I think having it in 120 makes more sense.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I think, yeah, Steve K, I think we can pretty safely move this one into 120. The V1 Alpha 2 API issue.
That one's from the operator repo, actually,
Is it?
but it's definitely not happening in 119 regardless.
Yeah. Let's put it in the V120 and see what we end up doing. I think we might need to go through and close out a lot of issues in the operator repo, because fundamentally we're not going to implement them there.
What happened to the NAC issue? Is that
so
being looked at at all?
Sanjay has that one and is ticking away on it, right, Sanjay?
Yeah, I'm working on it. I'm trying to write up to look at it holistically and not just like bang away and just implement something. I want to like have a wider ranging like implications, find out how it works, because it's going to be a big change, and I want to like test the state of the world and how Contour works today and see how much improvement we get.
Yep.
Okay, so that sounds like that's a good candidate for 121, actually. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Not
yes.
for
Like
120.
I don't see that. Like, I don't see that we'll have too much actionable stuff before that time frame. Like, I mean, I would hope that we're going to spend the time to really understand this problem. Like, Sanjay's got a lot of work to do to sort of even write down the problem. Then the rest of us have to understand what he's written down and agree with everything. And that sort of process takes time. Sanjay, do you think 121 is fair?
Yeah, that sounds fair.
Cool. Rough guesses, right?
Yeah.
Um,
It's always better to push it out and then run fast if we're faster then.
yeah, exactly. Better to positively surprise people than negatively surprise people, right?
Yeah. Under promise, over deliver,
Yeah.
that whole thing.
That's what I was thinking of. It's still too early in the morning for me to remember things easily. So yeah, similarly for the operator, this one, operator should not allow multiple contours to exist with the same gateway API controller string. That yes, that absolutely should be the case. But like, I think it kind of comes down as well to how is that going to work with managed envoy and stuff like that. I think that at least needs to go into 120. I think that I need right now. I think Steve S really strongly is of the opinion that we should retire operator repo altogether and like move the functionality that the contour operator binary currently has into a contour operator command on the contour binary. So we only ship one container image that just has different modes of running. I would like to see us consider that carefully before we take that step, though. So I'd like to see us do a proper design process for that. Micaiah, I see you're there. Would I mean, your distro does a lot of operator stuff. Do you have are there other open source projects that put the operator into the same container as the thing that it's as the operand?
I don't recall ever seeing that before.
Right.
I have seen where the operator binary grows additional diagnostic tools, that kind of thing, but I haven't seen where the operator gets folded into the operand.
Yeah, it feels a little unusual to me too. That's why I asked. I mean, in this case, the reason that we're doing it is that there's actually going to be a ton of code reuse between the two things, and we release them in lockstep anyway. So I'm pretty sure, like, I don't want to speak 100% for Steve S, but we release them in lockstep anyway. There's going to be a ton of code sharing, so in some respects, it does make sense to have only one thing that we release. Like, if nothing else, it's just less button to push. But yeah, I also don't want to end up in being like the really, really odd one out without a very good reason.
Could also be same repo, but two different binaries, two different
Yes,
container binaries,
true.
which would make our lives easier in one sense, but still have two things to release that have separate responsibilities, separate code paths.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just off the top of your head, Makai, do you have any thoughts there? If you don't, that's completely fine.
Yeah, I can't think of a reason why putting them in the same repository would be an especially bad idea. I'd still hesitate to do the combining into a single executable.
Yeah.
Although I guess it doesn't make that big a difference if it's two subcommands of the same binary versus separate binaries. Yeah, this is a new idea to me, so yeah. Just off the cuff, I don't have a strong argument against it, but it does seem a little strange. Like you said, it's something you'd want to think very carefully about.
Yeah, and that's what. So I think that we definitely need if we are going to consider like folding the repos together, which does seem to have some advantages, then we definitely need a design doc for that to sort of explain what the advantages are, why we're choosing to do it, acknowledge the fact that some bits about it are weird, and and that we think that the weirdness is worth the is worth the benefits we're going to get.
Are we talking about putting the operator, combining the operator repository with
Yes.
the main one?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with Makai. I think it feels a little bit strange, but doesn't mean it can't be done, you know, if we're careful about it.
Yeah. So as I said, I think that needs a run up and a discussion. Yeah, I think that yeah, we'll talk to Steve S about that one. Okay. How are we doing? So I guess at this point we should sort of say, like, I think we're pretty close to closing out the 119. I'll need to just go through and check all of the milestone stuff. Looking at the milestone, like project progress bar, there's still, you know, there's still some stuff there. There's four things open. So I think a lot of those, I think a lot of stuff that's in the milestone can be moved out. I will do that after this. Is there anything that anyone wants to talk about moving around, or should we just work our way down the 120 stuff that's in 120 release and talk about it?
So there's like a limit request payload. Someone created that, and someone else had brought this up before. I don't see it in 120, but I don't know if that's something we could tackle.
Is it in? So I mean, I feel like that one's another one where we need to talk about like what the thing is actually going to do, and that's another one where it feels like, you know, and we need to check the exact behavior that Envoy does. Like, is it a limit on the request payload? Like, and that's like, if we set this thing by default, does that mean that no request can be larger than the body, or is this only for sending to the? I think maybe it's that only sending to external auth, and some other stuff like that. So I think there's just a little bit of investigation that we need to do on that one.
I see it. It is tagged under investigating and not.
Cannot limit request. Yeah, so it's yeah. So yeah, so we can. I think that one just needs a bit more sort of backwards and forwards to say, like, what do you want to have it? Yeah, like I think Steve already asked, like, do you want to have it globally, or one just for HTTP1, one for HTTP2? So yeah,
I think this
is another. Sorry,
I think this one is interesting for Edge. I've heard of Edge, like deployed on Edge, to have requirements.
Right. Okay. They want to be able to.
They have a tiny footprint, like they have everything running. You know, the entire stack running on a 1U 2U cluster, and everything's automated, right? They don't have like multiple personas, and the application and the application on the Kubernetes cluster on the Edge site, you know, they can only process specific, like, payments, right? If you're talking about stores, they process payments, transactions, and things like that. So if you're sending strange workloads, strange requests that are, you know, unusually large, they'll want to gate that. That's kind of what I've heard from one of the customers.
Okay. Yeah. So I think in general, this one looks like it's actually not that far away from being like, it just needs a little bit of work to come up with, like, here's what we actually need to configure, here's how the design would work, and then here's how the implementation would work. So that's why I sort of had this comment here that I'm highlighting. And I think in terms of the question you asked, Alex, I don't think that we're ever going to really get a better answer than it depends on the feature. Like, I don't think we can be any more general than, should we do this globally, locally, or a combination of both? I don't think that we can go much better than it depends, and look at things on a case-by-case basis. I think that there does tend to be sort of common patterns, and so the common patterns are You know, some things only need to be set globally, you know, and some things can only really meaningful when they're like per route or per service. But some things you want to be able to have the behavior where the administrator who controls Contour can set a value that they can then say can't be overridden by an application developer. Client timeout is a classic example there. And there are other cases where you do want them to be overridden. Interestingly enough, in the Gateway API, this is the exact reason for that policy extension mechanism I mentioned briefly earlier, is that it has the idea that you can set overrides. You can have a policy that attaches to like your gateway that has overrides for values that will override any value that's for a policy that's attached to a route or anything further down the tree. And you can also set defaults where they will be overridden by things set further down the tree. So you can set a default client timeout, and then you can set a client timeout override that as well. And so the default client timeout will be if you don't specify something, then you get this value. But the override is you will always get this value, and you can't change it. And so the policy extension mechanism Gateway API is sort of took some of the stuff that I have noticed here at Contour and like I put that into the Gateway API thing to solve this sort of problem. So hopefully as we go deeper into the Gateway API, we should start finding that there's a way for us to solve this problem in a more generic way for some classes of setting. Like, I mean, I think this like request buffer size is a really good example. Having that as a gateway policy, that will affect everything in the gateway. That is everything in the Contour deployment. Versus, or you can take that exact same policy object in the Gateway API and attach it to a route instead, and then it will only affect the route. And that is the mechanism for doing this exact thing that we're talking about here, and having the same thing be able to be applied at different levels.
I haven't seen this policy object, but it sounds like you're saying it's its own custom resource, right? That you can.
So yeah, so it's actually a class of custom resources. It's intended that different implementations will probably need to have their own specific custom resources, because it's very hard for a lot of these settings. They're not easily generalizable between proxy implementations. Timeouts again is a great example. Like, you can't generalize a timeout setting between proxy implementations because different proxies cut timeouts off at different pointers. And so the intent here is that there'll be an Envoy timeout CID probably that all of us Gateway API implementers who use Envoy will probably end up using. And then so there'll be a Envoy timeout policy CID that you attach to either the gateway or to the route. And that will allow you to default timeout settings or override them. So it's that gap is like the skeleton of design at the moment. It doesn't actually have any implementations or sort of much guidance around what it is. It's like the space to put a real design. But that's what that real design kind of looks like.
I like that they have it, set up in such a way, because I feel like that's one of the, maybe not necessarily like a shortcoming, but it's one of the things I wish we had a better mechanism around for HTTP proxy, right? Because all of the information are basically defined on the HTTP proxy stanza. So like the way you've described it, it feels a lot like Kong, where everything is a plugin, right? So you OIDC, rate limiting, everything is a plugin, and you tie that to your routes, right?
So I think it's a little similar to that in some respects, but it's for configuration settings rather than for like flows. Like for flows like authentication or rate limiting and stuff like that, those are intended to be done with the filter thing inside the HTTP route in the Gateway API. But again, one of the reasons that it's taken a while to do this is that all of this is surprisingly difficult to get right, and there's a lot of really fine nuance in exactly how this thing works. And so, which is the exact stuff that we have found in the last like 3 years on Contour, that it turns out that a lot of these things are really hard and surprisingly hard. People are like, oh, why don't you just set a timeout? It's like, like we can, but like it might not do what you think it does. Yeah, like I just cannot go past the client request timeout. That
Right.
from the client point of view, there's one value you set, but from the Envoy point of view, there are like 5 different timeouts that add up to the total client request round trip time. Yeah, and different ones cover different parts and stuff like that. So, you know, there's a real sort of, if you want to hide some complexity from the person who, you know, from people, then it's difficult. Yeah. So sorry, that wandered a long way afield. But yeah, I think in terms of this request payload size, yeah, I think that we're going to end up with, for HTTP proxy, we'll end up with something like
IP allow list, similar.
Yeah, something like, it'll be something like that, where there's a, this one, it probably makes it, this one seems to me to make sense to have it does make sense to have a global and a specific bucket, because the global one you probably want to set to a relatively large limit, whereas the specific one you might be confident that requests will only ever be 2 kilobytes or something like that, and that anything over that is an error, and so you can do that. But that feels like a thing that you would need to set on a per route basis to me, that setting a hard request body size limit globally, it feels very risky. Yeah, and that's not pretty large.
Yeah, I think you'll always have users that like want both.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you want it globally, right, it's like, it's nice to just set that place once, but then you also have the ability to override it if you specify it on the actual route itself. Right.
Yeah. So yeah, again, I think the policy mechanism we've done for Gateway API actually is a pretty good solution to this problem. But I think
sounds like it.
Probably going to really need to implement something to sort of or to at least run out a design for a use case to make it clear to everybody how that thing should work. Probably timeouts. Yeah, I'll make a note for myself. Okay, so so for this one, I think it's right for it to be investigating for now, but one of us probably needs to end up assigned to it, so that we check. So how should we, so for this one, I feel like it's at a stage now where it needs some work. Actually, no, it probably doesn't need to be investigating anymore. I think that, you know, we've done the investigation here, that, you know, we need, someone just needs to actually do the work to do the design now. So probably doesn't need to be.
Yeah, it goes into P1, right? I mean, that's how I've been interpreting it. It's like we can't put in a specific release yet, but we feel pretty good.
Yeah, it's ready. So and I can remove needs triage because we have triaged it. It is a HTTP proxy needs design. Cool. Okay, let's clear that filter. So yeah, should we just quickly, we've got like, we're out of time actually. That discussion took longer than I thought.
I was gonna say the endpoint slice one. I'd like to have that in 120, but we probably need another session to go through the 1.
Yeah, I think the endpoint slice support feels to me like yeah, like there's a little bit of complexity there, because you got to, if you're using one, like you kind of got to not use the other, or you got to merge the sets, or like there's someone's just going to have to sit down and understand what we currently do with endpoints, how endpoint slice is different, and what we should do about having both of them be available as options. Like, because there's also the controllers inside Cube actually do some copying backwards and forwards of endpoints to endpoint slice, and endpoint slice to endpoints. And so you need to understand like which bits are being copied and which bits aren't, and what's available and what lines does this draw under our Kubernetes support that aren't already there, and that sort of thing.
Are there plans for endpoint slice to just completely replace endpoints at some point?
I think that the compatibility guarantees mean that endpoints can never completely go away. but everyone is certainly being strongly encouraged to move to endpoint slice because it's a better API. It's more scalable, it's better designed, lessons learned, all that sort of thing. Okay. Does anyone, so we're over time, but does anyone have anything they want to mention before we wrap this up?
I'll create a 1.21 column and
Cool.
start moving things there.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'll just do a rundown that 120 column and make sure that everything is moved to the 120 milestone as well. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming. Thanks for the feedback, Micaiah. I really appreciate it. And see you all around.
Thanks, everyone.